The sun burned the prairie like a curse. A young woman hung upside down from a wooden beam, her wrists tied raw, her face swollen and streaked with blood. Flies buzzed around the corners of her cracked lips. Her hair clung to her cheeks, matted with sweat and dirt. Evie could barely breathe. Her throat rasped with every exhale, and her heartbeat thudded like a drum inside her skull. The sky spun in circles. The air tasted like dust and iron. 2 hours under the blazing sun, and her mind began to slip. She thought of her sister's laughter, then of Jeb's fists, then nothing at all. A dry whisper escaped her, barely a breath. "Untie me." The sound carried, faint but desperate, across the empty grassland. From a distance, a horse stopped. A man turned his head, narrowing his eyes against the glare. His name was Eli, a rider from Bar H Ranch, old enough to have seen too many graves and too many storms. But something in that voice pulled him off the saddle before he could think. He sprinted toward the sound, boots pounding over cracked earth, dust rising behind him. When he saw her hanging there, he froze for half a second. Then his knife flashed. His knife flashed twice, left, then right, catching her before she hit the ground. The blood rushed down her arm like fire. Evie gasped, eyes rolling open to meet his. They were gray eyes, weathered but steady. For the first time in forever, someone looked at her and didn't turn away. Her lips trembled. Crave. The word tore out like a plea, half pain, half fury. Eli caught her as she fell. Her body was light, all bones and bruises, her breath shallow against his chest. He could feel her trembling, her heartbeat wild like a trapped bird. The air around them shimmered in the heat. He pulled off his hat, shielding her face from the sun, his rough hands gentle on her skin. "Hold on, girl," he muttered, voice low, almost to himself. "I got you." Evie tried to speak, but her tongue was too dry. Her world blurred into flashes of sky and dust and the shadow of a man who didn't walk away. The wind carried the smell of blood, sweat, and leather, and somewhere in that haze a question began to rise. Who was this stranger brave enough to stop for her, and what would he do when he found out who she really was? Evie felt the ground before she saw it. Her body hit the dirt with a dull thud, dust puffing around her face. Then strong arms caught her, holding her up before she could fall again. For a moment, she didn't know if she was alive or still drifting somewhere between the sun and the dark. The smell hit her first: leather, smoke, and sweat. The scent of the open road and a man who had seen too many summers. Eli's shirt brushed her cheek, rough but warm, and she let her head rest there. Her breath came in short bursts. He could feel it against his chest, like a broken bird trying to take flight again. "Easy now," he said softly. His voice was gravel, calm but low. "You're safe, girl." "I got you." Evie blinked. The world swayed and blurred, the sun a pale fire above them. Her lips parted and her voice came out in pieces. I crave." Then she stopped. She didn't know what she craved anymore. Freedom, water, a reason to live, maybe all of it. Eli pulled a canteen from his saddlebag. He tilted it to her lips. The first sip burned her cracked throat, then cooled it. Sweet as mercy. She closed her eyes for a second, tasting the metal of the water and the dust of the road. Memories flooded in, sharp and cruel. Her sister running through the door with tears on her face, the sound of a belt hitting wood, the way silence in that house could hurt more than noise. She had promised herself never to cry again, but the water on her lips felt like forgiveness. Eli watched her, saying nothing. He had seen that look before, in battlefields and border towns, the look of someone trying to remember how to be human again. He let her drink till the canteen was almost empty, then said softly, "Don't waste what keeps you alive." She smiled weakly. "Maybe I forgot what that was." He looked away toward the horizon. "Then you remember now." Her hand shook when she reached for it. He steadied her fingers, calloused and careful. "Where you from?" he asked. She tried to answer, but her voice failed. All she could manage was a weak smile, half gratitude, half disbelief. He sighed, glancing at the horizon. The heat shimmered over the dry grass, stretching endless and cruel. Somewhere, a buzzard circled slow. "Don't look back," he said, as if talking to himself. "Not in a place like this." Evie studied him, The lines on his face, the scars, the quiet way he moved. He wasn't like the others. He didn't look at her with pity or hunger, just steady eyes that seemed to carry both weariness and care. It was strange how safe she felt beside him, under that merciless sky. She whispered, voice trembling. "Why'd you stop for me?" Eli looked down, the corner of his mouth twitching, not quite a smile. "Guess I got tired of riding past what's wrong." The wind blew dust across their boots. Somewhere behind them, a door slammed. Echoing through the still air, Eli's hand went to his gun belt. Instinctive, sharp, Evie stiffened, eyes wide again. The silence stretched tight between them. Someone was coming, but who would ride out here in this heat? And why now? The sound came first, boots crunching on dried dirt, slow and mean. Then the smell of whiskey. Jeb stepped out from behind the barn, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Eyes bloodshot, smirk crooked. He had been hiding there since sunrise, watching from the shadows, waiting to see his wife suffer. The sun hit his face, and for a second, Eli saw what kind of man he really was. He'd been waiting for this moment, drunk on hate and cheap whiskey. Evie froze, her breath caught like a knife in her chest. Every scar on her body seemed to burn again. Jeb's laugh was low and bitter. Well, look what the wind blew back. He took a step closer, his boots stirring up small clouds of dust. Two of his drinking pals drifted out from the shade by the lean-to, bottles in hand, squinting at the heat. Eli stood between them before she could even move. He didn't raise his gun yet, just stared hard, calm as stone. "That's far enough," Eli said quietly. His voice was steady, but the weight in it made Jeb hesitate. Evie's hands clenched at her sides. She had spent months being quiet, being afraid, but something in her snapped then. The fear turned into fire. She took a step forward, her voice shaking but sharp. "Crave justice. You hear me? You beat my sister till she ran and never came back." The words cut through the hot air like a whip. Even the cicadas went silent for a heartbeat. Eli's jaw tightened. Jeb scoffed, muttering something about women in trouble, but the tremor in his tone betrayed him. The air grew heavy. Jeb shifted his weight, smirking like a man who thought fear could still work. One of his pals laughed under his breath, but it was a thin, nervous sound. The wind carried the smell of whiskey and sweat and something meaner. Eli's jaw flexed once, his boots planted firm in the dust. He didn't like violence, but he'd lived long enough to know sometimes it came looking for you anyway. Evie stood just behind him, breathing hard, her fists tight enough to leave small crescents in her palms. The world shrank to the circle of dirt between them, hot and dry as judgment. Eli's hand went to his Colt. The steel gleamed under the sun. Then came the crack, loud and clean, a single shot over their heads toward the fence. The bullet split a whiskey bottle on the rail clean in half. Glass raining to the ground. The yard went still as a church. Men only moved their eyes. A few of Jeb's drinking pals froze and dropped to their knees on instinct. They all knew that sound, and they all knew the man who fired it. Eli used to wear a sheriff's star, and no one dared test his aim. Even Jeb flinched, eyes darting, dust hung in the air like smoke. Eli looked at Evie, his eyes steady, a quiet message there. "You started this. Now finish it." She walked toward Jeb, slow and shaking, her shadow cutting across the dirt. He tried to look away, but her voice pulled him back. "You will say it. You will say you're sorry." Her voice broke, but she didn't back down. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Only the wind moved, carrying the heat and the smell of gunpowder. Jeb opened his mouth, but no sound came. He was trapped in his own shame. Eli lowered his gun, eyes still locked on him. "Say it, boy," he said quietly, and in that silence, justice finally started to breathe. Sometimes the West didn't need lawmen. It just needed someone who still believed right was worth fighting for. If you're still here, take a sip of your tea and let me know what time it is where you're listening from. And hey, if you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button. There's more waiting on the trail ahead. The wind picked up again, sweeping through the empty yard. The air smelled of gunpowder and sweat. Jeb was still on his knees, face red, hands shaking. The world seemed to hold its breath. Eli stood silent beside Evie. His shadow stretched long across the dirt, steady as an oak tree. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes was enough to tell Jeb what would come next. "Say it," Evie whispered. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Even the flies seemed to stop buzzing. Jeb's mouth twitched and his jaw tight. "Say it," Eli repeated, his tone flat like a command from the earth itself. Jeb finally broke. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry." It came out rough, shallow, more like a cough than an apology. Evie's shoulders trembled, but she didn't look away. She took a small step forward, her boots pressing into the dust, louder. This time Jeb's words rang through the hot air. "I'm sorry, Evie." His head dropped. The sound of it seemed to echo across the empty field. Evie stood there, silent. The trembling in her knees faded, replaced by something steadier, stronger. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't scared. She looked down at him, eyes burning but dry. Then she spat, a drop of red from her split lip landing on his dusty boots. Jeb stared at the stain, too ashamed to wipe it off. That single act said everything words never could. Eli stepped closer, his hand brushing gently at her back. "That's enough," he said quietly. His voice felt like shade after a long sunburn. "Now breathe." "Girl," Evie exhaled slowly, her whole body shaking from the weight of it all. The rage, the fear, the years of silence, all of it poured out with that breath. Eli holstered his gun and looked out at the horizon. The sky was burning orange, the kind of light that made you believe maybe tomorrow could be different. He turned to her, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Justice served, I'd say." Evie nodded. Her throat was dry, but there was something like peace sitting in her chest. She glanced back at Jeb, still kneeling in the dust, then turned away. She didn't need to look anymore. Eli offered his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you home." The sun dipped low, and the light wrapped them both in gold. For a moment, the world felt quiet again, but deep down, Evie knew peace was never free out here. Not in this land, not in the West, because the hardest part wasn't justice. It was learning how to live after it. The sun was almost gone when they reached Bar H Ranch. The light turned soft and gold, washing over the wooden fences and the dry grass that stretched for miles. Eli helped Evie down from the horse. Her legs were weak, but her spirit wasn't. He didn't say much. He just handed her a tin cup filled with cool water and sat down beside her on the porch. For a long time, neither spoke. The world was quiet except for the wind and the sound of crickets beginning to sing. Evie stared at the horizon, eyes still red but calmer now. She held the cup with both hands, feeling the cool metal against her palms. It was strange how peace could feel so heavy and yet so light at the same time. Eli lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the warm air. "You did good today," he said. His voice was steady, like gravel smoothed by rain. Evie let out a breath, half a laugh, half a sigh. "Feels strange," she said quietly, "to finally stand up, to finally stop running." He nodded. "It always does." They sat there while the stars began to show. For the first time, Evie didn't feel small. She didn't feel like a victim. She felt alive. Broken maybe, but still breathing. And sometimes that's enough to start over. Eli poured her another drink, this time sweet tea from a glass jar he kept in the shade. She smiled, eyes soft. "I crave," she whispered, almost to herself. "Your name on my heart." He looked at her for a long moment, then just placed his hand over hers. No words, no promises, just the quiet truth of two people who had both lost too much and still chose kindness. He remembered Laura, the woman from the market who always wore that blue dress. Evie had her eyes, though hers burned with a different kind of fire. The night deepened, the land was still, and in that stillness something shifted inside her. Maybe the West wasn't only about revenge or survival. Maybe it was also about finding the courage to live again. The night wind brushed her hair, carrying the scent of sage and rain that hadn't fallen yet. She thought about the road ahead, about the people who never got another chance, somewhere inside. She knew tomorrow wouldn't be easy, though. The world wouldn't change just because one man knelt in the dirt. But maybe she didn't need the world to change. Maybe it was enough that she did. She looked at Eli's hands, scarred and steady, resting on his knees. He was a man carved by storms, still finding beauty in broken things. For the first time in years, she wanted to see a sunrise, not survive it. The thought scared her, and it felt good to be scared for the right reason again. Evie looked up at the sky. "How many of us," she said softly, "keep carrying old pain when all we really need is one good chance to let it go?" Eli smiled, the kind that only men who've seen too much can manage. "Maybe that's the real kind of freedom," he said. Under the wide Wyoming sky, two lost souls found each other. No promises, only a quiet hand to hold. And sometimes that is enough to heal a whole lifetime.